Jacob's vow at Bethel, that the Lord should be his God, Genesis 28, verse 21, did oblige all that his posterity virtually comprehended in him. He found him in Bethel, and there he spake with us, saith the prophet, many 100 years after, Hosea 12, verse 4. The Israelites vowed to destroy the Canaanites did oblige all their posterity, Numbers 21, verse 2. Not only by virtue of the Lord's command, but by virtue of their vow, as we are obliged to preserve the Reformation, not only by virtue of the Lord's command, but by virtue of our covenants. Vows are bound to the soul, which must stand, Numbers 20, verses 2 and 4. And whereas it is said that a woman's father or husband might disannul her vow, and so the magistrate might abrogate the covenant, besides the impertinency of this comparison, as might be easy to demonstrate, it may be refelled by giving and not granting, that he might do so. Yet if the father and husband shall hold their peace, then all her vows shall stand, and her bonds wherewith she bound her soul shall stand. Verse 4, verses 7. But so it was that the supreme magistrate did give his consent to the national covenant, and the successor did swear the solemn league and covenant, and receive the crown on the terms thereof, to preserve and promote religion and liberty. And therefore his vows must stand. They cannot be made void afterwards, for it is a snare to devour that which is holy, and after vows to make enquiry. Proverbs 20, verse 25. So we find the Rechabites were obliged to observe the vow of their forefathers Jonadab, Jeremiah 35, verses 6 and 14. And if the father's vow obliges the children, shall not the nation's vow oblige the posterity? Thirdly, they are national oaths which do oblige posterity. Esau's oath to Jacob, resigning his birthright, did oblige his posterity never to recover it. Genesis 25, verse 33. Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel to carry up his bones into Canaan. Genesis 50, verses 25, which the posterity going forth of Egypt in after ages found themselves straitly sworn to observe. Exodus 12, verse 9, and accordingly buried them in Shechem. Joshua 24, verse 32. The spies swore to preserve Rahab alive in her house. Joshua 2, verse 12, etc., which was without the consent of the magistrate, and yet Joshua found himself obliged to observe it. Joshua 6, verse 22. Moses swore unto Caleb to ensure him an inheritance, Joshua 14, verse 9, and upon this ground he demands it as his right, verse 12, which he could not do if successors might reverse their predecessors' lawful oaths. The Lord will in a special manner resent and revenge the posterity's breach of the oath of their father's covenant, Ezekiel 16, verse 59. Quote, Thus saith the Lord God, I will even deal with thee as thou hast done, which hast despised the oath in breaking the covenant. Unquote. This was the covenant of their fathers. Fourthly, they are national covenants wherein king, parliament, and people do covenant with each other for the performance of the respective duties of their several stations, either as to the work of reformation or as to the preservation of each other's mutual rights and privileges, so that they are national covenants made by men with men, and these we find to oblige the posterity. Israel's covenant with the Gibeonites did oblige the posterity, Joshua 9, verses 15 and 19. And for the breach of it many ages after, the posterity was plagued, 2 Samuel 21, verse 1. Zedekiah was bound by his predecessor's covenant, though it was such as made the kingdom base, yet in keeping it, it was only to stand. Quote, Shall he break the covenant and be delivered? Thus saith the Lord, As I live, surely mine oath that he hath despised, and my covenant that he hath broken, even it will I recompense upon his own head. Unquote. Ezekiel 17, verses 12, 14, 15, and 19. The apostle says even of human covenants, quote, Though it be but a man's covenant, yet if it be confirmed, no man disannulleth or addeth thereunto. Unquote. Galatians 3, verse 15. That is, cannot do so lawfully, much less can one man disannul a nation's covenant. Fifthly, they are national attestations of God as a witness for the perpetuity as well as fidelity of these sacred engagements. All such covenants wherein the holy name of God is invocated as witness are owned of God and his. Hence the covenant betwixt David and Jonathan is called the covenant of the Lord, 1 Samuel 20, verse 8. And Zedekiah's fault was the breach of the Lord's covenant, Ezekiel 17, forecited. So likewise that covenant mentioned in Jeremiah 34, verses 8, 9, and 10, wherein the princes and people did swear to let their Hebrew servants go free, is called God's covenant in verse 18. And upon this account, sorer judgments are threatened in verses 19 and 20. Quote, And I will give the men that have transgressed my covenant, which have not performed the words of the covenant which they had made before me, into the hands of their enemies. Unquote. Certainly this did oblige the posterity, at least not to recall these servants, and it was always morally obliging. So our national covenant, sworn with hands, lifted up to the Most High God, being materially also binding, cannot be abrogated by the posterity, except the Lord renounces interest in them, as long as the witness liveth then, who claims them as his. They cannot be made void, especially considering. Sixthly, they are national covenants made with God, as the other party contracting in the matters of God, which none can dispense with or grant remissions in, and therefore they must perpetually bind until he loose them. And even if the posterity break them, the Lord will make them that hate them to reign over them, and he will bring a sword upon them to avenge the quarrel of his covenant. Leviticus 26, verse 15, 17, and 25. Such were all the national covenants of the Lord's people, renewed by Joshua, Asa, Jehoshaphat, Hezekiah, Josiah, Ezra, Nehemiah, for the breaches of which the Lord plagued the posterity. It was for the breach of their fathers' covenant with God that the 10 tribes were carried away captive. 2 Kings 17, verses 15, etc. We have already experienced the threatened judgments for covenant breaking, and many look for more. And may look for more. Seventhly, they are for their matter national covenants about things moral objectively, obliging to join ourselves to the Lord in a perpetual covenant that shall not be forgotten. Jeremiah 50, verse 5. I might easily demonstrate in all the articles of the covenant to be morally binding, but they are demonstrated sufficiently above. Head 1, Argument 11. Therefore, they are perpetually binding. Eighthly, they are for their ends national covenants, inviolably obliging, which cannot be made void, though they should be broken, because the ends of them are always to be pursued, as is proved above. Head 1. Therefore, they are perpetual. Ninthly, they are for their formality national covenants, most solemnly sworn and subscribed by all ranks, with uplifting hands and bended knees, with solemn invocating the name of God, with solemn preaching, prayer, and praise, rendering themselves and the posterity obnoxious to the curse, if they should break it. Now the solemnities of the oath do aggravate the heinousness of the breach of it, as is clear from Jeremiah 34, verse 19, and Ezekiel 17, verse 18, quoted above. The reason is because of their greater deliberation in the action, and because of the greater scandal accompanying the violation thereof. Hence, as they are national oaths and covenants so solemnized, they are national abjurations under the pain of a national curse, not to break them nationally, which do make the posterity obnoxious to it. As Joshua adjured Israel, saying, quote, "Cursed be the man that raiseth up and buildeth this city Jericho," unquote. Joshua 6, verse 26, which was fulfilled many generations after in the days of Ahab, upon Hiel the Bethelite. 1 Kings 16, last verse. So the curse of introducing abjured prelacy and popery, if it be let in, will be impotent on the nation. All national covenants have a curse annexed, in case of a breach, whenever it shall be. So in Nehemiah's covenant, quote, "They clave to their brethren, and entered into a curse, and into an oath, to walk in God's law, which was given by Moses, the servant of God, and to observe and to do all the commandments of the Lord our Lord, and his judgments and statutes, particularly not to enter into affinity with their malignant enemies," Nehemiah 10, verses 29 and 30, which certainly did oblige the posterity, because the thing was moral. So in our covenants we are bound to the same things, and nothing but these, and therefore the posterity is liable to the curse of perjury for the breach thereof. Tenthly, they are for their legality national laws, being solemnly ratified by the Parliament and by the King, and made the foundation of their compact with him at his inauguration, whereby they became the fundamental laws of the government, and among the very laws and rules of governing, which, though they be rescinded by a wicked law, yet make the rescinders chargeable, not only of perjury in breaking a covenant, but of treason and tyranny in breaking and altering the constitution of the government, and render them liable to the curse thereof, for they cannot rescind that, nor escape its vengeance, whereof we have the speaking pledge already, in that the rescinder of these covenants was so terribly rescinded and cut off by the hands of unnatural violence, God thereby fulfilling that threatened judgment of covenant breakers, that he hath broken his covenant, that he that hath broken his covenant, shall be brought to destruction, and bloody and deceitful men shall not live out half their days. Psalm 55, verses 20, and the last verse. So Charles II got not leave to live out the last days that he projected to himself. 11thly, they are national engagements of an hereditary nature, like that of Israel in Deuteronomy 29, verse 14 and 15, which did oblige, not only the present, but the absent, quote, "Not only them that stood there that day before the Lord their God, but them that were not there that day, unquote. Grotius de Jure Bell, Lib 2, Cap 6, gives these marks of hereditary covenants. Firstly, when the subject is of a permanent nature, and as long as the same body remains, therefore as long as Scotland is Scotland, whose people in their personal capacity, whose parliaments in their parliamentary capacity, whose king in his princely capacity, did all solemnly and sacredly engage in the covenant, it must be real and perpetually obliging. Secondly, when there is such a clause in the covenant as that it should be perpetual, there are many clauses in the Solemn League to this purpose. In Article 1 are these words, quote, that we and our posterity after us may as brethren live in faith and love, and the Lord may delight to dwell in the midst of us, unquote. In the 5th article, quote, we shall each one of us, according to our place and interest, endeavor that the kingdoms may remain conjoined in a firm peace and union to all posterity, unquote. Thirdly, when it is such as is made for the good of the kingdom, the covenant expresses its end for the perpetual good of the kingdom, quote, having before our eyes, the glory of God, the advancement of the kingdom of Christ, the honor and happiness of the king and his posterity, and the true public liberty, safety, and peace of the kingdoms, wherein everyone's private condition is included, unquote. And again, it is added, quote, for the preservation of ourselves and our religion from utter ruin and destruction, unquote. All this is a public national good. Fourthly, the matter is moral, about materially binding duties, and therefore it must be hereditary and of perpetual obligation. 12thly, lastly, there are national obligations, taking on public duties by way of virtual representation of the posterity, and they that think it irrational that the father should represent and involve the family, must resolve us how the religious and civil covenants of Israel and Judah, made in Moses, Joshua's, David's, Asa's, Joash's, Hezekiah's, Josiah's, and Nehemiah's days, did comprehend and bind as well the absent as the present, and their posterity yet unborn, as also how the laws and contracts continually passed by some do take in others, not personally consenting. Yea, how comes it to pass that every succeeding generation is bound to the laws, and must be obedient to the kings that they did not make themselves? No reason can be given, but because they are virtually represented by and included in their fathers. Now, if these arguments prove our national covenants to be perpetually binding and cannot be dispensed with, then must these posterior oaths that are made in diametrical opposition to the covenants and are condemned by the covenants be false and unlawful oaths. But the first is proved, therefore these oaths so opposite to and condemned by the covenants are false and unlawful. That they are opposite to the covenant will appear in the induction of all of them, and whatever they be imposed by this party. They are condemned by the covenants, wherein we are obliged to make no such transactions with them, will appear if we consider these in the like expressions, quote, that we shall, neither directly nor indirectly, suffer ourselves to be divided by whatsoever suggestion, allurement, or terror from this blessed conjunction, nor shall cast in any let or impediment, that may stop or hinder any such resolution, as shall be found to conduce for so good ends, unquote. Which are the words of the national covenant, clearly condemning oaths and bonds given to malignants, which are divisive of them that adhere to, and unitive of them that oppose the covenant, and impeditive of resolutions to prosecute the ends thereof. So, in the Solemn League and Covenant, Article 4, quote, we are obliged to oppose all such as make any faction or parties amongst the people, contrary to this league and covenant. But by these oaths and bonds, such factions are made, etc. And in Article 6, quote, we are obliged to assist and defend all those that enter into this covenant, contradicted by all the latter oaths and bonds, and not to suffer ourselves directly or indirectly, by whatsoever combination, to be divided from this blessed union, whether to make defection to the contrary part, or to give ourselves to a detestable indifferency, unquote, etc. Which we do when we divide ourselves from these that refuse these oaths, and make defection unto the party that imposed them. And in the solemn acknowledgment of sins and engagement to duties, quote, we are sworn, section 6, to be so far from conniving at, complying with, or countenancing of malignancy, injustice, etc., that we shall not only avoid and discountenance these things, etc., but take an effectual course to punish and suppress these evils, unquote. All which we counteract and contradict when we take any of these oaths or bonds.